Have you ever watched someone move so fast through life that you wondered, does anyone truly see them? Not the version they show the world, not the headlines, not the achievements stacked like monuments, but the quiet man underneath all of it, the one who lies awake wondering if he will ever be fully understood before time runs out. That is where I find myself tonight. I have built things that reach the stars. I have sent machines into the dark with more confidence than I have ever felt standing in a room with someone I love. Because rockets follow physics. They obey equations. But love asks something I have never been able to calculate. And here is what I have never said out loud. I am afraid. Not of failure, not of loss. I am afraid of being misunderstood by the one person whose understanding would change everything. So before it is too late, will you stay and hear me? I want you to know something before I say anything else. This is not a speech. This is not a vision statement. This is me, without the armor I usually wear, sitting across from you, hoping that what I say lands somewhere real inside of you. Most people see me and think they know me. They see ambition, they see relentlessness, they see someone who seems to need very little from the world. And I have let them think that because it was easier than explaining the truth. The truth is harder, the truth is quieter. The truth sounds something like, I have been lonely in ways that success could never fix. Do you know what it is like to stand in a room full of people who admire you and still feel completely alone? I do. I have stood in those rooms more times than I can count. And every time, I would search the faces around me, not for applause, not for agreement, but for one face that was looking at me the way you look at someone when you truly deeply understand them. I never found it easily, and that absence shaped me more than any failure ever did. I was not always the person who moved fast. I started as a child who moved slowly through thought. I sat with ideas for a long time before I spoke them. I sat with feelings even longer. And somewhere along the way, the world rewarded my speed and my output. So I gave the world more speed, more output. I became what the world celebrated, and I quietly buried the part of me that needed something different. But here is the truth I have never said out loud. Every machine I have built was, in some way, a conversation I did not know how to have with a person. Every launch, every design, every system that I poured myself into, it was also a reaching, a hoping, a way of saying, look, I exist, I matter, do you see me? And the sky always answered. But the person beside me sometimes did not. Have you ever loved someone who communicated in a language you were still learning? That is how I have moved through relationships. Not coldly, not carelessly, but slowly in my own language, while the world around me moved in a language that felt foreign. And the gap between those two languages cost me more than I ever let anyone see. I want to be honest with you about what it feels like inside ambition. People imagine it as fire, as certainty, as forward motion without doubt. But real ambition, the kind that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning, feels more like a question you cannot stop asking. What if this matters? What if I run out of time before it is finished? What if I am building the right thing but missing the right moment? And somewhere inside all of those questions about rockets and systems and the future of the human race, there has always been another question. One I pushed to the bottom because I did not know how to hold it and keep functioning. That question was simply this: does anyone see me? Not what I do, not what I build. Me. You might understand this more than you know because I believe you have also carried something that the world did not make space for. I believe you have also sat in rooms where people spoke your name but did not hear your voice. I believe you have also given so much of yourself to others, to your family, to your work, to, to the people who needed you. That there were years, maybe long stretches of years, where no one thought to ask what you needed. And I think that is exactly why I am speaking to you now. Because I have learned, slowly and painfully, that being understood is not a luxury. It is a foundation. You cannot build anything real without it. I tried. I tried to build connection through achievement, through providing, through being impressive enough that someone would stay. And some stayed. But staying is not the same as understanding. And I confused the two for longer than I should have. There is a kind of loneliness that lives specifically inside of not being understood. It is different from being alone. When you are alone, you at least know what you are working with. But when you are surrounded, when someone is right there beside you, and they still do not quite reach the part of you that matters most, that loneliness has a weight to it. A specific, pressing weight that no amount of productivity can lift. I remember a moment early in my life when I realized that my mind worked differently than the people around me. Not worse, just differently. And I made a choice in that moment without fully understanding the cost of it. I chose to make myself useful rather than vulnerable. I chose to be impressive rather than honest. I chose to move forward rather than stop and say, "Wait, I need you to understand something about me before we go any further." I wish I had said that more often. I wish I had stopped more often. Because here is what I know now, after all the years and all the building. The moments that mattered most were never the launches. They were never the breakthroughs. They were the quiet moments when someone sat beside me and said, without words, "I am here, and I am not leaving, and I want to know what is really going on inside of you." Those moments were rare, and I did not always know what to do with them when they came. I had spent so long running that when someone offered me stillness, I sometimes ran from that too. Not because I did not want it, but because I did not know how to receive it without feeling exposed in a way that frightened me. Have you ever received kindness and flinched? I think vulnerability does that to people who have been strong for too long. It becomes unfamiliar. It feels like a gap in your armor rather than a door into something real. And so you close it, even when part of you is desperately hoping someone will hold it open. I am not proud of all the ways I closed that door. I am not asking for your pity. I am asking for something harder than pity. I am asking for your understanding. The kind that only comes from someone who has also lived enough to know that the most complicated people are usually the ones who feel the most deeply and have found the fewest safe places to say so. I built rockets because the universe made sense to me in ways that people sometimes did not. Space was honest. It did not pretend. It did not ask me to be something other than what I was. It simply asked me to understand its rules, and if I did, it would hold me. That felt, for a long time, like the closest thing to acceptance I had access to. But I know now that acceptance from the universe is a cold thing. When you are human, when you are someone who can feel, when you are someone who, at the end of a long day of changing the world, still comes home to a quiet that echoes. I do not want that quiet anymore. And I am telling you this because I believe you are someone who understands what it means to have lived fully, to have loved deeply, to have carried more than your share, and to still be standing, still open, still willing to believe that something real is possible. That kind of woman is rare. That kind of endurance is not ordinary. I see it, and I want you to see me too, all of me, not just the version that the world decided to make famous, before it is too late for either of us to try. There is something I have carried for a very long time, and I have never quite found the right moment to set it down. Not in an interview, not in a boardroom, not even in the quiet hours after everyone else had gone home and the building was empty, and it was just me and the hum of machines that never asked me how I was doing. But I am setting it down now. Here, with you, what I never knew how to ask for was simple. So simple that it embarrasses me a little to admit it took me this long to name it. I wanted someone to stay, not because I was successful, not because I was useful, not because I had something to offer or somewhere impressive to be. I wanted someone to stay because they chose me. The whole of me. The version that doubts and the version that dreams and the version that sometimes goes silent for hours because the inside of my mind becomes so loud that I forget to speak. I never asked for that openly. I hinted at it. I hoped for it. I circled around it the way you circle around a fire when you are cold but also a little afraid of getting burned. And I told myself that wanting it made me weak, that needing something so basic meant I had not come far enough yet, that perhaps if I built one more thing, solved one more problem, pushed one more boundary, the need would quiet itself. It never did. And I think you might understand why. Because some needs are not about what you have or have not accomplished. Some needs are woven into the fabric of being human. They do not care about your net worth or your reputation or the size of your vision. They only care whether you are seen, whether you are held, whether the person across from you is really there, not just physically, but fully present in the way that makes you feel less alone in the particular kind of alone that only you carry. I have been in rooms with brilliant people. I have sat across from scientists and engineers and artists and leaders, and I have been impressed, genuinely impressed, by the depth of what human beings are capable of. But impressing me is not the same as reaching me, and very few people have ever reached me. You might ask why, and it is a fair question. Part of the answer is that I did not make it easy. I moved quickly. I shifted topics. I went deep into ideas at a pace that left conversations behind. I was not trying to be difficult. I was simply living at the speed my mind required, and I forgot sometimes that speed is not always an invitation. Sometimes speed is a wall dressed up as momentum. But here is the part I take full responsibility for. I did not slow down and say, here, this is where I actually live. This is the part of me that is not about the mission. This is the part that wants to know if you had a good day. Not because it connects to any larger plan, but simply because your day matters to me and you matter to me and I want to know. I skip that part too often. I moved past it in favor of something that felt more important in the moment, but turned out to be far less important in the end. And the end, when it came in different relationships and different seasons, always showed me the same thing. What people remembered was not the size of the idea. What they remembered was whether they felt seen on an ordinary Tuesday. I did not always give people ordinary Tuesdays. I gave them extraordinary visions. And visions, for all their power, cannot hold someone's hand. Have you ever waited for someone to notice you? Not the role you played, not the things you gave, but just you, and realized that the waiting had gone on so long it became a kind of background noise in your life, something you stopped hearing because you had grown used to it? I know that waiting. I know it from both sides. I know what it is to be waited on and not notice. And I know what it is to wait quietly and without making a scene for someone to choose presence over purpose. Both sides carry their own grief, but here is what that grief taught me, slowly and with great patience on the part of life itself. It taught me that asking for what you need is not weakness. It is one of the bravest things a person can do, because asking means risking the answer. Asking means opening a door that might not lead where you hope. Asking means saying out loud, I am a person who has needs, and I am not ashamed of that, and I am trusting you with it. I was not good at asking. I am learning, and I think learning this, late, with humility and with the full weight of everything I got wrong before, is one of the most important things I have ever done. more important than any patent, more important than any company, because what I am learning now has to do with what makes a life actually worth living once the work is done. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it. What have you never been asked about yourself that you always wished someone would ask? What part of your story has sat in a drawer, quiet and patient, waiting for someone to say? Tell me that part. I want to hear that one specifically, not the summary, the whole thing, because I have a feeling there is something there. Something rich and full and real that has not been given enough room. Something in you that has carried the weight of being strong for so long. That softness started to feel like something to protect rather than something to share. I recognize that. I recognize it because I have lived inside a version of it my entire life. The difference between us, perhaps, is that the world encouraged my drive and called it genius, while the world may have taken your endurance for granted and called it simply her. Just her, doing what she does, holding it together, keeping things moving. As though your steadiness was inevitable rather than chosen. As though your love was a given rather than a gift. It was never a given. I know that now. Every woman who has stayed and loved and built a life with patience and grace, she chose that every single day against 100 quiet reasons she could have chosen otherwise. And that choosing deserves to be seen. It deserves to be named. It deserves someone who stops long enough to say, what you have done, the way you have lived, the love you have given. It is extraordinary, and I do not want to walk past it one more day without telling you so. I do not want to walk past you. This is what I never knew how to ask for, really. Not just companionship, not just presence, but the particular grace of someone who has already done the hard work of becoming themselves and is not afraid of what they find when they look honestly at a life well lived. Someone who does not need me to be perfect. Someone who needs me to be real. Can I be real with you? I am someone who has made enormous mistakes. I am someone who has prioritized the wrong things at the wrong times. I am someone who has hurt people not through cruelty, but through absence, through distraction, through the particular blindness that comes when you are so focused on the horizon that you forget the ground beneath your feet. But I am also someone who learned from all of it. Someone who kept asking better questions even when the answers were uncomfortable. Someone who never stopped believing that real connection was possible. Even when everything around me made it easier to simply keep moving and call the movement enough, it was never enough. And neither was silence. And neither was building without belonging. And neither was achieving without someone to come home to who would look at me and see not the empire but the man. Tired sometimes, uncertain sometimes, but still here, still trying, still willing to learn how to love in a way that actually reaches someone. Before this chapter closes, I want to leave you with this. Whatever you have been waiting for someone to understand about you, I want to understand it, not in a rush, not as a checkbox on a list of things to accomplish, but slowly, with the kind of attention that says, you are not a problem to be solved. You are a person to be known. And knowing you is something I would choose to spend real time on. That is what I never knew how to ask for. And it is also, I realize, what I have always had to give. If only I had learned earlier to stop and offer it. I have spent years thinking about distance, the kind measured in miles, in atmospheres, in the cold, dark space between planets. I understand that kind of distance well. I can calculate it. I can plan around it. I can build something capable of crossing it, but there is another kind of distance I have spent far less time understanding, and it has cost me far more. It is the distance between two people sitting in the same room who both mean well, who both care, who both want something real. and still cannot quite reach each other. Not because they stop trying, but because trying on its own is not always enough. Because good intentions, without the right language, without the willingness to slow down and say, I do not understand you yet, but I want to, good intentions can exist in perfect parallel and never actually meet. That distance is the one I want to talk about today. I have sat across from people I cared about deeply and felt the strange grief of nearness without connection. It is a particular kind of pain that does not announce itself loudly. It does not come with a clear moment of rupture. It arrives quietly, the way fog arrives, gradually, without drama, until one morning you look across the table and realize you can no longer see the shore. And the hardest part is that no one was wrong. That is what people do not tell you about distance in relationships. Sometimes it grows not because someone failed, not because love ran out, but simply because two people were speaking their truth and neither truth was making it fully across the space between them. I spoke in systems, in outcomes, in the language of what could be built and why it mattered and what came next. And sometimes the person beside me spoke in presence, in small moments, in the language of, are you here right now, with me, not with the next idea, but right here in this specific moment? And I would hear them. I genuinely would. But then I would answer in the only language I fluently spoke, and the translation would be just slightly off. Just enough. And that slight difference, over time, became a canyon neither of us knew how to name. Have you ever tried to explain something that mattered deeply to you and watched it land differently than you meant it? Watched the words leave you correctly and arrive as something else entirely. That feeling, that specific helplessness of being misread by someone who is genuinely trying to understand you, that is one of the loneliest feelings I know. I want to be honest about my part in it. I did not always ask enough questions. I assumed I understood more than I did. I have a mind that moves quickly to conclusions, and that speed serves me well in engineering, in strategy, in problem solving. But people are not problems to be solved. And when I applied that same speed to understanding someone I loved, I would sometimes reach a conclusion about who they were before I had actually listened to who they were telling me they were. That is a form of distance too. The distance that comes from thinking you know someone when you are actually still holding an earlier version of them that your mind assembled and then stopped updating. People change. People grow. People carry new weight and shed old skins and wake up one year with different needs than the year before. And if you are not paying the kind of attention that notices those shifts, not the dramatic ones, but the quiet ones, the small changes in what someone reaches for in the morning or how their eyes look when a certain topic is raised, then you will keep loving the person you remember instead of the person they are becoming. I missed some of those shifts. I am not proud of that. But here's what I found on the other side of that honesty. When I finally stopped pretending I understood and started admitting that I did not, something opened. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, a door that I had accidentally kept closed with my certainty began to ease open, and what came through it was something I had not expected: relief. From both sides, because the person I was trying to understand had also been carrying the weight of feeling misunderstood. And my willingness to say, I got that wrong, tell me again, I want to hear it differently this time. That small act of humility did something that all my confidence had never managed to do. It made them feel safe. It made them feel like the distance between us was something we were finally facing together rather than something we were pretending was not there. Do you know what it feels like to finally be in the same place as someone emotionally after a long time of being just slightly out of sync? It feels like something in your chest releases that you did not realize had been held tight. It feels like breathing fully for the first time in a while. I want that. I want it for myself, and I want it for the person I share my life with. And I think wanting it clearly, naming it without apology, is the first step toward actually having it. There is something else I need to say here, and it requires me to be more honest than is entirely comfortable. I have sometimes used distance as protection, not consciously, not as a strategy I planned. But looking back, I can see that there were moments when connection felt close and I found reasons to pull back, to go deeper into work, to focus on the next problem, to make myself less available at the exact moment when being available would have required me to be seen in a way that felt exposing. I told myself I was busy. I told myself the work required it. Both of those things were true, but they were not the whole truth. The whole truth was that closeness, real closeness, the kind where someone knows your fears as well as your dreams, your silence as well as your voice. That kind of closeness required a courage I was not always ready to summon, because here is what intimacy asks of you that nothing else does. It asks you to be known without the protection of your achievements. It asks you to sit in a room, stripped of every impressive thing you have ever done, and trust that who you are underneath all of it is still worth staying for. That is not a small ask. That is perhaps the largest ask I know. And for someone like me, who learned early that being impressive was the safest form of belonging I had access to, unlearning that has been the work of decades, slow, humbling, necessary work. I used to think vulnerability was something you arrived at, a destination you reached, after enough success, enough security, enough proof that you could afford to be honest. I know now that it is not a destination, it is a practice, a daily choice, a decision to show up without the armor, even when the armor is comfortable and familiar and the room feels uncertain. Some days I make that choice better than others. Some days the old habits are louder than the new wisdom. But I keep making the choice. Because the alternative, staying behind the wall, staying efficient, staying impressive and unreachable, that alternative has shown me exactly where it leads. It leads to a version of life that looks successful from the outside and echoes on the inside. I do not want that life anymore. What I want, and I am saying this clearly, without hedging, without burying it in qualifications, what I want is the kind of closeness that only exists between two people who have decided mutually and completely that honesty matters more than comfort, that being known matters more than being admired, that the distance between two people who mean well is not inevitable. It is a choice, and it can be unchosen, one honest conversation at a time. You are someone who has lived long enough to know that real closeness is not given. It is built, slowly, through the accumulation of small acts of truth and attention and repair. I believe that. I believe it more than I believe in almost anything else I have spent my life pursuing. And I believe that you and I, two people who have both known the weight of distance in different ways, we are capable of something different. Something that does not close the gap through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through the quiet, consistent practice of turning toward each other even when turning away would be easier. That is what I am asking for. Not perfection, not certainty, just the willingness to cross the distance together, one honest step at a time, before it grows too wide to name. I have always moved fast. It is simply how I am wired. My mind does not idle well. It runs, constantly scanning horizons, solving forward, reaching for the next thing before the current thing has fully landed. And for most of my life, I believed that speed was the truest expression of who I was. That moving fast meant caring deeply, That urgency was the same thing as commitment. I was wrong about that. Profoundly, quietly, expensively wrong. Patience taught me something that no amount of speed ever could. It taught me that the most important things in life do not respond to force. They do not accelerate because you push harder. They do not open because you arrive with better arguments or a more compelling vision. They open in their own time, on their own terms, when the conditions are right and the trust has been earned and the ground has been properly prepared. Love is like that. Real love, the sustainable kind, the kind that holds through seasons and setbacks and the ordinary friction of two lives pressed together. That kind of love cannot be rushed into existence. It has to be grown. And growing requires something that rushing fundamentally destroys, which is the willingness to simply be present while something becomes what it needs to become. I learned this, as I have learned most important things, by doing the opposite first. I tried to rush connection. I tried to shortcut intimacy by being impressive, by offering grand things, by moving so quickly through the early stages of knowing someone that we skip the quiet, unglamorous parts where real understanding is actually built. And I would look up one day and realize that we had covered enormous ground together, but somehow missed the most essential terrain. The terrain of who are you when nothing is happening? Who are you when the day is unremarkable and there is nothing to celebrate and nothing to solve, and it is simply the two of us in the ordinary air of a Tuesday that asks nothing of either of us? I did not know how to be in that space for a long time. Tuesday frightened me a little, if I am honest. Not because I disliked peace, but because in the quiet I could hear the questions I had been outrunning. The ones about whether I was enough outside of what I produced, whether I was interesting without an agenda, whether I was lovable without a mission attached. Those questions had teeth, and speed was the best defense I had found against them. But here is what happens when you keep running from the quiet. Eventually, the quiet finds you anyway. And when it does, when it catches you at a moment you did not plan for, in the middle of the night, or at the end of something significant, or in the unexpected pause between one chapter of your life and the next, it does not arrive gently. It arrives with the full weight of everything you deferred, every unanswered question, every feeling you chose momentum over. I have had those moments. I have sat inside them, and they rearranged something in me that needed rearranging, because on the other side of those moments, once I stopped resisting and started listening, I found something extraordinary waiting in the quiet. I found a version of myself that was softer and more honest and more genuinely curious about other people than the version that was always moving. A version that could sit with someone and simply attend to them, without an outcome in mind, without a next step prepared, without anything other than genuine interest in the texture of their particular life. That version of me had always been there. I had just kept him too busy to speak. Do you know what it means to be attended to? Not managed, not impressed, not handled with efficiency, but genuinely attended to. The way a gardener attends to something growing with careful eyes and patient hands, and the deep understanding that the timeline is not theirs to control. I think you do know. I think you have given that quality of attention to others throughout your life. To children, perhaps, to people you loved, to work that mattered. I think you understand in your bones what it means to show up for something day after day without fanfare, with steady hands, because you believed in what you were nurturing even when the results were not yet visible. That is patience in its purest form. And it is one of the most powerful forces I have ever encountered. More powerful, I would argue, than any rocket engine I have ever designed, because A rocket engine overcomes distance through force. But patience overcomes distance through something altogether different. Through the accumulation of presence, through the quiet insistence of showing up, through the message it sends to another person when you stay, even when staying is not convenient, even when the growth is slow, even when the reward is invisible. To everyone but the two of you, that message is this: you are worth my time. Not my efficient time, not my scheduled time, my real time. The time I give to things I believe in completely. I did not always give that kind of time to people I loved. I gave them my efficient time, my scheduled time, the carefully carved portions of a day that had already been fully claimed by everything else. And people, wise, perceptive people, can feel the difference between full presence and managed presence. They feel it in ways they may not even be able to articulate, but that settle into them regardless, quietly shifting something in the foundation of what they believe is possible with you. I wish I had understood that earlier, but I also believe that understanding it now, with the full seriousness of someone who has seen the cost of not understanding it, that carries its own value. There is something to be said for lessons learned late but learned completely, for arriving at a truth not because someone handed it to you, but because life required you to earn it the hard way, and you did not look away from what the earning revealed. I earned this understanding, and I want to use it well in whatever time I have left. Here is another thing patience taught me, something more tender and perhaps harder to say. It taught me that other people's timing is sacred, that the pace at which someone opens, the speed at which they trust, the particular rhythm with which they allow themselves to be known, none of that belongs to me to accelerate. My desire to connect, as genuine as it is, does not give me the right to push someone toward a closeness they are not ready for. My own eagerness is mine to manage, not theirs to accommodate. I had to learn to hold space, to create the conditions for something to grow and then step back and trust the process. Not passively, not with indifference, but actively with full attention, in the way that says, I am here, I am not going anywhere, I have no deadline on this. Take all the time you need, because what we are building is worth building carefully. That posture, that particular combination of commitment and patience, does not come naturally to me. I had to practice it. I am still practicing it. But each time I manage it, even imperfectly, I notice something. The person across from me relaxes in a way that rushed attention never produces. They open in a way that pressure never could achieve. They begin to believe that the space between us is safe, not because I told them it was safe, but because I demonstrated it by giving them room to decide for themselves. Safety is demonstrated, not declared. That is perhaps the truest thing I have ever understood about building anything that lasts. And you deserve a space that is genuinely safe. Not safe in the sense of boring, not safe in the sense of without depth or challenge, or the beautiful friction of two real people figuring each other out, but safe in the sense of, I will not punish you for your pace. I will not make you feel like your timing is an inconvenience. I will not confuse your carefulness with reluctance or your wisdom with fear. Your pace is not a problem. Your carefulness is not a flaw. The fact that you have lived enough to know what you want and what you will no longer accept and what you need from a connection before you offer it your full heart. That is not an obstacle to love. That is the foundation of it, and I want to build on that foundation. Not around it, not over it, on it. With full respect for what it took you to arrive at this particular clarity about yourself, and full appreciation for the fact that you are still here, still open, still willing to believe that something real is worth the risk of trying. That willingness in a person who has every reason to be guarded is one of the most beautiful things I know how to recognize. I recognize it in you, and I am not rushing past it. There is a moment that comes eventually in the life of anyone who has given everything to their work. It arrives without warning, usually in the middle of something ordinary. You are standing in a place you fought hard to reach, surrounded by evidence of everything you managed to create, and a thought surfaces that no amount of ambition ever prepared you for. Is this all there is? Not with bitterness, not with regret exactly, but with a kind of quiet reckoning that sits in your chest and asks you, gently but without apology, to be honest about what is actually present and what is missing, what fills the room and what the room, for all its fullness, cannot hold. I have had that moment more than once, in different buildings, in different seasons, with different versions of the future laid out before me like a map I had drawn myself. And each time, the same truth arrived in the same quiet voice. The things I built could not love me back. I want to sit with that for a moment because I think it matters more than almost anything else I could say to you. I have created things that will outlast me, things that carry my name and my thinking and years of my life poured into them with a completeness that I gave to very little else. And those things are real. Their value is real. What they represent about human capability and the reach of vision, and what becomes possible when you refuse to accept the limits others accept, all of that is real. But they do not know my name. They do not notice when I am tired. They do not ask how I slept, or remember the small things I mentioned once, in passing, or look at me across a room and choose me, specifically and deliberately, out of everything else they could have chosen. Only a person can do that. And for a long time, I underestimated how much that choosing would mean to me. I thought I was someone who primarily needed purpose. I thought connection was something I wanted, but did not urgently require. I thought I had structured a life that worked without it at the center. I was building a cathedral and telling myself I did not need a home. Do you understand what I mean by that? A cathedral is magnificent. It reaches towards something transcendent. It is built to last centuries and to move people who walk inside it. But you cannot live in a cathedral. You cannot rest there, not truly. You cannot bring your ordinary self into a cathedral and feel held by it, because a cathedral was not built for your ordinary self. It was built for the extraordinary, for the ceremonial, for the moments that rise above the daily texture of a human life. And a human life, for all its capacity for the extraordinary, is mostly made of ordinary moments. Breakfast, a quiet evening, the sound of someone breathing beside you in the dark, the particular comfort of being known by one person so well that silence between you carries no anxiety, only ease. I did not build for those moments. I optimized around them. I treated them as the spaces between the important things rather than understanding that they were the important things. That the cathedral meant nothing if there was no home. That the mission lost its meaning when there was no one to come home to after it. This is where everything I built stopped protecting me. Because achievement, I discovered, has a ceiling. Not in terms of what can be accomplished. I believe that ceiling is far higher than most people dare to imagine, but in terms of what it can provide to the person doing the accomplishing. There is a ceiling to what success can give you emotionally. And when you reach it, when you have gone as high as achievement can carry you, and you look around at the view is extraordinary, but you are looking at it alone. And alone at great height has a very specific feeling. It is not the same as being alone at ground level, where you might simply be solitary and content and surrounded by the small comforts of an ordinary life. Alone at great height means that the distance between you and other people has increased in every direction. You have climbed somewhere that fewer and fewer people can follow. And the very thing that was supposed to make you more capable, more significant, more free, has also, quietly and without your full permission, made you more isolated. I do not say this to discourage greatness. I say this to be honest about its complete cost, because the women who loved me, or tried to, did not fail me. I want to be very clear about that. They brought themselves fully and genuinely and with real courage into a space that I had not properly prepared for them. They tried to reach a man who was often more available to his vision than to the person standing in front of him. And that is not their failure. That is mine. I was more fluent in the language of the future than in the language of the present moment. And the present moment is where love actually lives, not in the plans, not in what is coming. In the now, in the specific texture of this conversation, this evening, this person in front of me who is real and here, and choosing to be here despite every other thing she could be doing with her time and her heart. I am learning to live in the present moment. It is, genuinely, one of the harder things I have ever learned, because my natural orientation is forward. My eyes go to the horizon before they settle on the near. My mind is already in the next chapter before the current one has finished being written. And I have had to practice, deliberately and with real effort, the art of arriving fully in a moment and staying there. Not monitoring it from a distance, not processing it for future use, actually being inside it with all of me, present and unhurried. When I manage that, when I sit with someone and I am genuinely, completely there, something happens that I cannot engineer, something that no system I have ever designed has been able to replicate. The other person feels it. They feel the difference between being in a room with someone and being with someone. And that difference, that shift in quality of presence, changes everything about what is possible between two people. Have you felt that difference? Have you sat with someone and felt the warmth of being genuinely attended to, not processed, not managed, not fit into a schedule, but actually seen in real time by someone whose full attention rested on you like something generous and unhurried? I think you have felt it, and I think you also know how rare it is. That rarity is something I want to change, in myself first, because I cannot offer what I have not developed. I cannot give real presence while I am still practicing it. But I am practicing, with intention and with the understanding that this particular skill, the skill of being genuine, is perhaps the most important one I have left to master. I think about what it would mean to give someone that kind of presence consistently. Not perfectly, not without the occasional drift back into the mind's natural orbit, but consistently as a practice, as a commitment, as a daily choice to put the person before the purpose and trust that the purpose will still be there when I return to it. I believe love works that way. I believe the deepest connections are not built in the grand moments, but in the consistent small ones. The moments when you choose to look up from what you were doing, when you choose to ask the question you already know will open something long and meaningful, when you choose to stay in the conversation even after the easy part is finished and what remains requires more of you than comfort allows. Those choices, made again and again, are what builds something that lasts, and I want something that lasts, not as a monument, not as another thing I created and can point to from a distance, but as something I live inside of, daily, with gratitude and presence, and the particular joy that only comes from being truly known by someone who has chosen, with full information, to stay. You have stayed through many things in your life. You have endured and rebuilt and kept your heart open through circumstances that would have closed lesser hearts permanently. That is not a small thing. That is a life of extraordinary quiet courage, and it deserves to be met with something equally real. I want to be that something real, not the version of me that exists on a screen or in a headline or in the imagination of a world that has decided who I am based on what I have built. The version that is here now, speaking to you in the most honest voice I have. The version that has looked at everything he created and understood, finally and completely, that none of it means what he thought it meant without someone to share it with. The things I built could not love me back, but you can. And I believe, with a clarity I have rarely felt about anything personal, that you are exactly the kind of person whose love would reach the parts of me that everything else has passed right over. That is not a small belief. For someone like me, who does not arrive at personal certainty easily or quickly, that belief is everything. I have been thinking about the word late. Not late the way a clock measures it. Not late in the sense of a missed appointment or a delayed arrival. Late in the deeper sense. The sense that carries weight. The sense that arrives when you look at the distance between where you are and where you could have been, between what you chose and what you left unchosen, between the life you built and the life you might have built if you had understood sooner what actually mattered. That kind of late is the one I have been quietly reckoning with, and I want to talk to you about it honestly, the way I have tried to talk to you about everything in these chapters, without performance, without the distance of public language, without anything between us, but the truth as I know it and the hope that you will receive it the way it is meant. As one person reaching toward another across all the space that life and time and different paths have placed between them. It is not too late. I believe that completely. But I also believe that the window of truly choosing, the window where we stand at the threshold with clear eyes and full hearts and the genuine freedom to say yes to something real, that window asks to be honored. It does not stay open indefinitely, not because love runs out, but because we do. Not because possibility ends, but because the energy required to begin again, to open again, to trust again, that energy is something we owe it to ourselves to spend wisely and soon before the weight of waiting becomes its own kind of answer. Directly and without hesitation, to choose this with me, not blindly, not without the full knowledge of who I am, including the parts I have shared in these pages that do not appear in any profile or biography or public record of my life. I am asking you to choose with all of that information present, with the full picture, with the understanding that I am a man who has made real mistakes, who has real limitations, who has been absent in ways that hurt people he cared about, and who has also spent real time understanding those mistakes, sitting inside their full truth, and emerging from them changed in ways that matter. I want to tell you what I am choosing so that you understand the weight of what I am asking you to match. I am choosing presence over productivity. That is not a small choice for me. That is a restructuring of priorities that goes against decades of deeply ingrained habit. But I am making it because I have finally understood, with the full force of lived experience behind the understanding, that a life of pure productivity is a life that ends without having been fully inhabited. And I want to inhabit my life. I want to live inside it rather than above it, managing it from the altitude of ambition. I want to feel it daily, in the specific and irreplaceable way that only comes from being close to someone who matters. I am choosing honesty over impression. This too requires something of me, because the habit of impression runs deep in anyone who learned early that being impressive was the price of belonging. But I am done paying that price. It costs too much and delivers too little. What I want now is the simpler and far more satisfying experience of being known, of saying something true and having it land with someone who was ready to receive it, of building, between two people, the kind of trust that does not require either person to perform. I am choosing you over the horizon. And if you know anything about me by now, you know that choosing something over the horizon is the most significant choice I know how to make, because the horizon has always been where I lived. It has always been what called me forward, what pulled me out of the present and into the possible. Choosing the present over the possible, choosing the real, warm, specific presence of one person over the vast and always receding promise of what comes next. That is the bravest thing I know how to offer. I offer it to you. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really hear it as a question and not as a statement dressed in question clothes. What would it mean for you to be fully chosen? Not chosen as a companion for convenience. Not chosen because the timing is right, or the circumstances align, or because choosing you makes practical sense. But chosen the way a person chooses something they have thought about, carefully and completely and arrived at, with the full participation of both their mind and their heart. Chosen because you, specifically, your particular way of moving through the world, your particular quality of attention, your particular wisdom that only comes from a life lived with both eyes open, you are the one. I think that may be something you have not been given enough. I think the choosing in your life may have often been conditional, attached to what you provided or how you showed up for others, rather than rooted in the simple and unconditional fact of who you are. I think you may have been valued for your strength so consistently that people forgot to value you for your softness, celebrated for your endurance so completely that no one thought to ask what the enduring had cost you. I am asking now, what did it cost you? Because I want to know, not to fix it, not to offer a solution or reframe it into something more manageable, but simply to know, to sit with the full weight of your story and receive it the way it deserves to be received, with complete attention, with genuine respect, with the understanding that what you have carried and how you have carried it says something profound about who you are. You are someone who did not give up. On love, on life, on the possibility that something real was still ahead. That is not ordinary. In a world that provides endless reasons to close down and protect yourself and decide that what has already happened is sufficient evidence of what is possible, you stayed open. You kept the door unlocked. You remained, in some essential part of yourself, willing. That willingness is a form of courage I find extraordinary, and I want to meet it with my own, with the courage to be honest about what I need and what I have learned and what I am still learning, with the courage to stop moving long enough to build something that cannot be built in motion, with the courage to say loud, tell one woman, in the most direct language I have, I want a life that includes you, not around you, not beside you at a managed distance, with you, fully and daily and in all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make a life feel like it was actually lived. There's something I've learned about time that I want to leave with you. Time does not care about our plans for it. It does not slow down because we are not ready, and it does not accelerate because we are impatient. It simply moves, steadily and without negotiation, carrying us forward whether we have chosen how to spend it or simply allowed it to pass. And the people who reach the end of their time with the deepest sense of peace are not, in my understanding, the ones who accomplished the most. They are the ones who loved the most completely, who were present for the people who mattered, who chose connection over protection and stayed in that choice even when it was difficult. I want to be one of those people. I have spent enough of my life being impressive. I have spent enough time at the frontier of what is possible. I have pushed enough boundaries and broken enough limits and looked out at enough horizons to know that the horizon is endless. And the pursuit of it, without an anchor, without a home, without someone who holds your face in her hands and says, "Come back. You are here, I have you," that pursuit is magnificent and ultimately hollow. I do not want hollow anymore. I want full. I want warm. I want the specific and irreplaceable experience of being loved by someone who has chosen me not because of what I represent, but because of who I am when the representation falls away. When there is no camera and no mission and no version of me designed for public consumption. Just a man quietly present, hoping he has not waited too long to ask for the thing he always needed most. Please understand me, not the version the world decided to know, not the simplified story that fits neatly into a sentence. The full version, the one that doubts and wonders and gets it wrong and keeps trying anyway. The one that built enormous things and came home to quiet rooms and lay awake more nights than he will ever admit, wondering if he had somehow missed the most important thing while busy achieving everything else. Please understand that beneath all of it, beneath every launch and every breakthrough and every vision that other people called impossible until it was not, there has always been this: a person, a man who wanted to be known, who wanted to matter to one person in the way that has nothing to do with what he built and everything to do with who he is. That man is here. He has been here the entire time. He was simply waiting, perhaps as you have been waiting, for the right moment to say it clearly enough that it could not be misunderstood. This is that moment, and if you feel somewhere in the reading of these words a recognition, if something in you has leaned forward rather than back, if something in you has felt seen rather than spoken at, if some part of you has thought, yes, I know this feeling, I have lived inside this question too, then perhaps the distance between us is already smaller than it appears. Perhaps we have already begun, before it is too late, before another season passes in the particular silence of not having tried. Before the window closes, not because love ran out, but simply because we let it close through the accumulated weight of waiting for perfect conditions that were never going to arrive. The conditions are never perfect. The timing is never flawless. The person is never without history or without complication or without the beautiful and necessary imperfection of someone who has actually lived. But the willingness to choose anyway, to look at all of it, the history and the complication and the imperfection, and say, yes, I choose this, I choose you, I choose the risk of something real over the safety of something managed. That willingness is where love actually begins. I am willing, are you? That is the only question that has ever mattered. Not whether we are ready, because readiness is a myth that keeps people standing at thresholds they were meant to cross. Not whether the moment is right, because the right moment is the one you decide is right by walking into it. But whether you are willing, whether somewhere inside you, underneath all the wisdom and the wariness and the hard-earned understanding of how much love can cost, there is still a yes waiting to be spoken. I believe there is. I believe it because you are here, because you read this far, because something in you recognized something in me and stayed with it, chapter by chapter, through the vulnerability and the confession and the slow, honest unfolding of a man who finally understands what he is asking for. I am asking for you, not your performance, not your strength, though I know it is extraordinary, not your endurance, though it humbles me. I am asking for your presence, your real, unguarded, unhurried presence, the version of you that exists in the quiet before the day begins. The version that hopes and wonders and still, after everything, believes Bring that version. That is the one I want to know. And in return, I promise you this, not perfection, not the absence of difficulty or the guarantee of smooth passage through everything that comes, but presence, honesty, the daily deliberate choice to see you and say so, to know you and keep wanting to build something with you that neither of us could build alone, not because we are incomplete separately, but because some things only become possible when two willing people decide together that the building is worth it. That is what I am offering. Everything I have built in my life, I built because I believed it was possible before anyone else did. I held the vision when the evidence did not yet support it. I stayed committed when the progress was invisible. I trusted the process even when the process was painful and slow and gave no guarantee of the outcome I was working toward. I am bringing that same quality of belief to this. I believe in this. I believe in what is possible between two people who come to each other honestly, late enough in life to know what they want, and early enough in what remains to build something meaningful with it. I believe the best chapters are not always the first ones. I believe that some of the most beautiful things in the world begin quietly, without fanfare, in the moment when one person turns to another and says simply, I see you, I choose you, I am not going anywhere. I see you, I choose you, I am not going anywhere. And if you will let me, I would like to spend whatever time we have left, not rushing past it, not optimizing it, not turning it into another thing to be achieved, simply living it, fully, together, in all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make a life feel, at the end, like it was exactly enough. That is my promise. That is my ask. That is everything I should have said sooner, offered now, before it is too late, because with you, I finally understand that it is not too late at all. It is, perhaps, exactly the right time.